Hello, it's me again. So this is continuation from the previous part, covering the events that happen in-game. Please watch the previous part before this one if you haven't, as the context is helpful. The destructive nature of the 7th Umbral Calamity brought with it many unexpected effects. One such event was the sudden appearance of old 5th astral structures, such as the Amdapor Keep and the lost city of Amdapor. The elementals had cast a potent glamour magic over these locations so that it would be forever hidden from mortal eyes, but the Calamity had unveiled these cloaking magics, revealing a city that had long been thought lost. This came with its fair share of issues. The concurrent dwindling of earth-aspected ether gave rise to a moldering blight that swiftly ravaged the overgrown vegetation within the ruins and threatened to spread throughout the Twelvewood. In response, Seed Seer Raya Osena raised a great ward to contain the blight, but she and her brother suspect there is some kind of an evil being lurking inside, so they send you on the job. You enter the city and find Diabolos, the very same Voidsent that the High Void Mage Kesar summoned all those years ago. His seal, too, was broken by the impact of the Calamity. You are unable to fully defeat him, and Diabolos teleports away to plan his next course of action. Sometime afterwards, you go investigate the Amdapor Keep as well and find Ferdinand, another high-ranking Voidsent who was also summoned by Mhach Void Mages to join the assault on Amdapor. He too is humbled by you and your companions, and he too retreats before being defeated and would eventually join his Lord Diabolos in whatever scheme he is cooking up. Meanwhile, Diabolos enters the Void Ark, which somehow empowered him and started shattering seals from the Voidsent on board. And so, this is where the actual questline begins. It's been a bit long-winded leading up to here, but context is nice and all, I think. You come into contact with a sky pirate by the name of Leofard, who wants to go on a high adventure to board the ghost ship of supposed elegant design that has been floating around the Sea of Clouds, because that's just what sky pirates do. You agree to join his crew, the Red Bills, a very small but respected sky pirate group. Notable members of this group include Leofard, the leader of the group. He grew up as an orphan in the Brooms and was very fortunate to have been adopted by a highborn widow with no children of her own. She raised him as if he was her own child, but unfortunately passed away due to her illness. Leofard then had no more reason to stay in Ishgard and so went on to explore the world and eventually became a sky pirate. Unlike many sky pirates, his motivation wasn't to pillage and plunder, but rather to take to the skies in search of treasure and freedom. A big reason for this was that he was particularly fond of the landmarks described to him by his adoptive mother that she would describe to him from history books each night at his bedside. Stacia, another orphan from Ishgard and also Leofard's right-hand woman. She is basically the accountant of the Red Bills as well. Utata, a talented Lalafell engineer from Ishgard who worked for the Highwind Skyways, the company that collaborated with Garland Ironworks to create technology that essentially led to the mainstream usage of regular passenger airship service. She had a falling out with the company though and ended up joining the Red Bills as the crew's engineer. A big aspiration for her is to one day eclipse Wedge as an engineer. You then enter the ghost ship, which turns out to be the Void Ark, that very same Mhach vessel with a disastrous maiden voyage 1.5 millennia ago. The ship, having been completely abandoned for a very long time, is inhabited by random carnivore creatures known as Ceduses. But as you delve further, you come to find that much more horrifying creatures reside in there, all liberated by Diabolos. One such creature being the Sawtooth. These were summoned by Mhach Void Mages for the purpose of poisoning the earth in enemy territories, an endeavor that sought to ruin crops and force the people of Amdapor into starvation. Each sawtooth was connected to the greater Voidsent Irminsul. The life energy of each victim it devoured siphoned directly into the unhallowed arbor. Besides that, you fight some blackguards, commanders of Voidsent legions, along with their hellhound minions, as well as a warrior of light from another world that fell from grace due to an Ascian scheme involving Auracite. Until finally you come across a very high-ranking Voidsent known as Echidna. You manage to overcome all of these obstacles and reach the end of the ship, where all kinds of treasure awaits. The huge variety of Voidsent aboard the Void Ark seems to suggest that the Mhach weren't particularly selective on which Voidsent they would summon or bring aboard to power up the ship, which shows to demonstrate how desperate they were after the destruction of the realm following the flood. You also observe that there are a ton of stone coffins all over the Ark. These sarcophagi were not, however, funerary vessels used to inter the remains of the vessel's passengers, but containment units for Voidsent summoned by the Ark's architects. The coffins served as arcane foci to channel the dark energies of the creatures trapped within and divert them to the Ark's engines. The biggest coffin of these is the massive stone kist behind the location where you slay Echidna. This coffin contains the Shadow Queen herself, Skaha. Anyway, before you can properly celebrate your victory, Diabolo shows up and opens the seal placed upon Skaha by Kesar and her loyal compeers, and you make for a swift exit along with Kaichi, the same familiar created by Kesar to safeguard the vessel. Diabolos then uses the ship to open a giant void gate. The ship has this function to allow it to easily travel from one location to another, but Diabolos only creates a rift large enough to allow him to transport the queen, still in her coffin, to another location. Kaichi, a mysterious talking feline creature, shares his origins to the baffled Red Bill crew. Once upon a time, he was a stray cat in the streets of Mhach, but Kesar found him to be really cute and turned him into his familiar. Kesar entrusted him with keeping watch over the seals imprisoning the Voidsent aboard the Ark. His appearance and mannerisms paint him as a living legacy of sorts. In speech and act, he represents the formality of the long-dead Mhach mages, and the cloak he wears is handmade by his late master. Kaichi speculates that Diabolos and the Queen would seek the Nullstone next, as it presents a great threat to their presence in this world. He also tells you where the Nullstone is located in. The relic is hidden deep within the great Mhach pyramid that towers over the south-strewn lowlands of Yafaem, in a city that was completely flooded but is now mainly just swamplands. Thanks to some shenanigans involving a compass that can detect etheric signatures from powerful Voidsents, you are able to follow them to the weeping city of Mhach. It's around this time that you also find out that a rival sky pirate crew called the Talons wanted to raid the Void Ark when their captain, Radelia, came to discover an ancient book that details the existence of both the Void Ark and the Nullstone. They stole the Ecto Compass, thinking it would lead them to the Ark and the relic, but ended up in Yafaem due to the reasons explained earlier. This ended up in a disaster as most of her crew were slaughtered by the Voidsent at the weeping city of Mhach. Using a copy of the compass, you are able to enter the city itself. You are nuisanced by two Voidsent nobles, both high up in the Voidsent hierarchy, and Ozma, a magic spheroid that was capable of devouring entire cities, and sent them into a state of dimensional compression. And finally, you have to confront Kang of History herself, the powerful mage entrusted with protecting the Nullstone. You prevail and receive the Nullstone, but get a surprise visit from your old friend Ferdinand, who tries to snatch the Nullstone, but he is easily overpowered by Kaichi blasting him with the Nullstone, forcing him to retreat. You also manage to save Radlia from Ferdinand, and she hands over the ancient book she had in her possession, written by a Mhach sorceress from that era. With the Now Stone in hand, you try to think of the next course of action to prevent the awakening of the Shadow Queen. You don't get to keep the relic for long though, as Diabolos, tired of sticking to the shadows, opts for a straight up assault and takes it from you via brute force. In the end, you manage to make him retreat, but the Now Stone is still in his possession and he intends to bring back the Queen. You read the ancient tome and discover a floating refuge, an island created by Mhach sorcerers to provide a safe haven from calamitous floodwaters called Dune Sky. This island was meant to be the bastion of hope that the population of the Void Ark would arrive in. But due to the disastrous voyage of said Ark, those citizens never arrived and it was basically just lost in time. Diabolos figured it would make for a good place to take refuge in and fulfill his ambitions. The island is of course nesting with Voidsent, summoned by Diabolos, and he would have presumably awoken the Queen to top it all off. Combining the two Sky Pirate crews, you prepare to enter Dune Sky. Before you can even enter the island, you get ambushed by Deathgaze Hollow, an enormous Voidsent, and a battle on the deck of the airship ensues. After defeating it, you come across Ferdinand, but this time you finish the job and put him down for good. Except not really. Before you can press on, you encounter an enemy you would never expect finding in such a place. A horribly outdated Ultima prototype mistook the awakening of the Shadow Queen to be a primal summoning and sought to destroy it. However, upon coming into contact with it, it decides that you are the highest priority target, whether because we resemble a primal or because of its broken AI or a combination of the two is unclear. After blasting Proto-Ultima, you finally encounter the Shadow Queen herself, Skaha. She is very powerful, but you manage to take her down, and that is when Diabolos reveals his endgame. He never intended to serve under his queen, rather he meant to usurp her and become the strongest being in the corporeal realm. He absorbs Skaha and becomes incredibly powerful, on par with the Cloud of Darkness herself. It's a very grueling encounter as Diabolos fights you with everything he has and seeks power from the void no matter the cost, but you manage to triumph over him once more. After another humiliating defeat at the hands of the Warrior of Light, Diabolos decides that the best course of action is to flee and hone his abilities with his newfound powers, then return when he has mastered them to become truly the most powerful being in the realm. Unfortunately for him, this doesn't come to pass as Leofard distracts him and Kaichi uses the opportunity to reach for the Now Stone and obliterates Diabolos, thus finishing his master's work by destroying the last remnant of the Shadow Queen's ilk, which concludes the storyline after some farewells and a happy ending. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, I do want to do a bit of speculation here at the end. Obviously, we don't have that many hints regarding the role of the Shadow of Mhach storyline in the future, but there are a few things worth taking into consideration. One is that the Void Ark still exists and is floating around. Perhaps the Void Ark will play a role in the story to come? Another mystery is Ozma. Now, the reason I'm singling out Ozma as an entity is that it's a very powerful entity with little to no explanation behind its powers. Of course, we can't rule out the decision to just leave it ambiguous as a creative choice, but it's also a possibility that the origins and utilization of Ozma's powers could be explored in the future. Finally, when it comes to the Void questline in Shadowbringers and us interacting with the 13th Shard, perhaps there is still a lot more to learn of the Voidsent, which could be information that can be retroactively traced back to this questline. Anyways, that has been all for this time. As always, consider subbing if you want to stick around this channel, and have a nice day.